Resident Evil has always been at the forefront of the survival horror genre, and that is for good reason. It is bloody terrifying. The plots are filled with serious zombie horror mechanics that actually make the monsters scary, as they aren't treated like the cannon fodder most zombie-related media seems to do with them these days. Gameplay is slow yet intense, requiring careful planning and good management to keep yourself ahead. Or just flailing and panicking, of course, whatever you decide in the moment. But what about all of the terrifying things most players don't see? The Easter eggs that hide in the shadows, and yet contain just as many scares as the mainline gameplay. Whether it's as simple as shooting the wrong place at the wrong time, or as complex as an off-camera hack. These Resident Evil Easter eggs have been some of the scariest examples of survival horror since the game's first graced the PS1. I am the S.T.A.R.S agent, Ash from WhatCulture Gaming, and these are 10 terrifying Resident Evil secrets and Easter eggs you need to see. 10. S.T.A.R.S. Resident Evil 2 Remake Demo. As if the still fresh Resident Evil 2 Remake wasn't terrifying enough with its tight corridors, near immortal zombies, and that damned Mr. X being everywhere at once, they just had to take it one step further. After the success of this remake, the developers fast announced the highly anticipated Resident Evil 3 Remake that fans had suspected would be next. While this was a cause for celebration, it was also a cause for unprecedented and ruinous dread, due to the much scarier Mr. X replacement, NEMESIS. And why do I mention this? Well, the team took the time out of their busy schedules to do as much as they could to remind players just why this walking behemoth of RPGs and bondage gear was so damn scary in the first place. In the demo, when the player decides to walk over to a seemingly empty corner of the outside of the police station, they are greeted by the deep, guttural voice of one of gaming's greatest monsters as he mutters his famous catchphrase. 9. The Goat. Resident Evil 7 beginning hour demo. There was a brief period of time before Resident Evil 7 was out that the internet was aflame with speculations and theory crafting due to the game's intense and mysterious demos. There were secrets abound, tapes, fingers, and a ghost girl that popped up at set points in the background. She would appear in the woods, just outside of a window, or just where you were standing as you slowly make your way down a ladder. The most terrifying thing about it all was how fast she would disappear as soon as she was spotted, giving the player second thoughts on whether or not they even saw her in the first place. In a truly terrifying twist, the girl turned out to be a leftover of a character simply named Daughter, who is in turn a precursor to Zoe and Mia. So while the character haunts poor Clancy and the sewer gators, she in turn haunts the game itself, a ghost of a character that was never meant to be. Her presence is unnerving, and just served to remind everybody that Resident Evil had not lost its touch. 8. Zombie Brad. Resident Evil 2. Brad Vickers is undeniably the worst member of the S.T.A.R.S team, his only real accomplishment being wetting his pants at the beginning of Resident Evil 1 and promptly abandoning the entire team, essentially trapping them in the mansion. So perhaps for this reason, Capcom made the tough decision to kill him off and have him return as a hidden zombie. The only way to encounter Brad is to play the game as usual, except without picking up any weapons or items on the way to the police station. Doing so will surprise the player with the awfully sturdy and particularly dead former S.T.A.R.S member in the tunnel under the station. 7. Don't Shoot the Water. Resident Evil 4. In a game filled with horrors of unimaginable size and strength, it is hard to believe that the most intimidating of them all is one of the first Leon encounters, until you learn it's basically the Loch Ness Monster on steroids, that is. Seeing Del Lago for the first time is a terrifying moment. Driving across the otherwise peaceful, if not ominous, lake, the player gets themselves involved in an accidental boss fight that they will come away from remembering for quite some time. But what if I told you can encounter good old Nessie quite a while before this? Worse, what if I told you it comes in the form of a jump scare and a game over? That is what happens when you first approach the lake and shoot off a couple of rounds into the water. Really, there is no reason the player should be doing this. There isn't anything in the lake to shoot at by that point, besides a few fish, and it's a waste of ammo. Yet, people still did it for some unknowable reason, and were soon faced with the wrath of one of the franchise's most terrifying monsters. 6. Past Sins. Resident Evil 3 Remake. And now for a different type of terrifying secret. The latest entry to the world of Resident Evil is the remake of its third title, seeing Big Bad Nemi brought back for some seriously stressful encounters. But as good as this return to form might be for Capcom's seminal franchise, that doesn't mean they always got things right every step of the way. Throwing back to the dark time of Resident Evil 6, there is a cheeky reference to this slip-up in a poster simply titled Disaster. That apes the cover art of 6 and seems to suggest Capcom are all too aware of their shortcomings. It is not terror in the traditional sense, but bringing up that past mess is scary enough for a mention, don't you think? 5. Losing a leg. Resident Evil 7. Early on in Resident Evil 7, the protagonist Ethan Winters loses his hand when held captive by the Baker family. Don't worry, he gets better. But what most people don't realise, and indeed some people will go through the entire game without ever seeing, is that Ethan can also lose a leg. Even more disturbing, he can then pick it up and sew it back on. Thankfully, the piece of flesh only takes up 1 block of space, but it's still a rather horrifying aspect of the game that very few players have seen. In fact, it is such a rare occurrence that it can only happen in 3 different ways. It can be cut off by Jack when Ethan attempts to use the hatch in the pantry, after which Jack will mock Ethan as he desperately crawls towards his freshly dismembered body part, or it can be taken again by Jack with a sudden low swipe in the processing area. Finally, some Molded can perform a special move and take it off as well. Each one is gory and shocking when it happens, making even seasoned professionals of the game recoil in horror. 4. Cardboard cutout creeper. Resident Evil 4. It is crazy what developers think they can get away with when they decide to place things outside of the map. So many games use the outer bounds of their play space to hide discarded ideas, disembodied heads, or just be plain weird about it. Resident Evil 4 unfortunately falls into the latter category. Found originally by a YouTuber called Slippy Slides, the egg in question is almost impossible to even notice, let alone see clearly, without having your brightness cranked all the way up. So hard to notice, in fact, that it wasn't found for 12 years. Just after the section where Mike crashes the helicopter, eagle-eyed players will be able to spot a figure in the distance. Using another camera hack, it is possible to see that the figure is actually a man in a green jumper whose sole purpose seems to be to stand in the shadows, just watching. 3. Nemesis-sized holes. Resident Evil 2 Remake. Most players will make their way through Resident Evil 2's remake slowly and methodically, not really worrying about the lore implications or anything beyond their own bladder and whether or not that liquor is still in the hallway from 2 hours ago. So it is no surprise really that nobody stopped to question just how did all of those holes get in the police station walls. It couldn't have been Mr. X because you see them scattered around the police station well before his arrival. Upon thinking about it, there is only one thing big enough to do this, and that is Nemesis. While this may be speculation, it simply makes too much sense to not be true, especially when you consider that Resident Evil 2 and 3 take place at roughly the same time, and it's clear that all of those holes are freshly made. It's a terrifying reminder that even when he isn't in the game, Nemesis has left a mark. And even if he isn't going to get Leon or Claire, he is still out there, and he's damn sure going to get someone. 2. Blair Witch Project. Resident Evil 7. While every player who watches the Resident Evil 7 tapes, particularly the derelict house footage, will see this scene, it should be pointed out that it's actually a rather scary Blair Witch reference. Ever since the sewer gators and poor cameraman Clancy entered the Baker residence, we all knew they were going to die. So when Clancy makes his way down an eerie ladder into a dark cellar, the player will already be at their wits' end. Then they turn around and see the once lost Andre standing completely still, staring at the wall. It is chilling to say the least, and it's hard not to notice just how much it mirrors the ending of the Blair Witch Project, as in the movie Mike stands in the same pose staring at a wall. The only difference is Mike didn't have a pipe sticking down his throat. Not sure who got off luckier there. 1. Lickerhead. Resident Evil 2. Lickers are one of Resident Evil's scariest monsters to date, which is impressive considering they look like a bargain basement carnage. So obviously, when first meeting one, it has to be dramatic, something to really make the player understand that this thing is not to be messed with. That is what players got in the release version of Resident Evil 2, with a fully rendered cutscene designed to show off the licker in all of its fleshy goodness. But in the beta, things weren't quite so dramatic. Simply put, Claire or Leon would walk towards a puddle of blood in a corridor, a head would fall down, and then the licker would follow. Pretty goofy for such a scary monster. However, in changing to a cutscene, the developers never bothered to get rid of the now floating head sitting just out of camera view. So, from a specific angle, the player is able to see the remnants of the now defunct licker introduction. Using some camera hacks, the more intrepid players were able to pull the camera back a bit and catch sight of the floating head as it stares directly into the camera. Maybe lickers aren't the scariest thing to haunt the police station after all. And that's our list. What's your favourite Resident Evil Easter egg? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. I've been Ash, over on Twitter at @AshMillman, and this has been WhatCulture Gaming. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and come back again soon for some more spine-tingling horror content.